What I have here today is something I've been looking for quite some time. What we have here is a survivor from the disco era, believe it or not. Welcome back to Canic Air. What I have here is a Webley Premier Mark II. And this is probably one of the, in some ways, one of the more unloved Webleys in the fact that it's fairly short-lived. They only made it from 1975 to 1977, which is, in Webley terms, a blink of an eye. A lot of the guns were in production for quite some time, with minor variations here and there. But this is the Premier Mark II. It replaced the Premier, obviously. The Premier had been around since 1964, and that's the one that took on the flagship of the Webley line. There was the junior model, which was the slightly more scaled back model for obviously junior shooters. But the Premier took over from the senior and the Mark I series. And Webley obviously wanted to consolidate things a little bit, just make one gun that did everything, sort of. And in 1975, the Premier, which was the last of the all-steel heavy cast guns, or forged, I suppose, thick, heavy steel parts on the back of the gun with that screw-in cover on the back. It would say, "Do not remove." This is completely different. This was Webley taking a whole new direction. What we have here is a cast aluminum. You can see the aluminum poking through the paint here, which is savagely worn off in a few places. They figured out how to take a steel piston tube and marry it to an aluminum casting. Presumably aluminum was a little bit easier to work with, a little less expensive. And it had the other advantage of reducing the weight of the gun a bit. And I do find that this gun suits me very nicely. I like the weight of it. The balance of it is pretty good. Compared to the Webley Senior, this seems a lot more packable and toteable for sure. It also has a trigger adjustment, a little screw that goes in there. I'll have to figure out what's going on with that. I like the fact that the trigger blade itself is actually fairly flat on the front. It's not rounded, which is kind of interesting. It's still got the traditional Webley Bakelite grips on there. They've been using those since the 1920s, so yeah. No engravings on it, really. This is essentially a decal set in here. Webley and Scott Limited Premier Mark II, made in England. And this is looking pretty tired. It was originally white lettering, and that's gone kind of greenish gray. So I'll have to see what I can do with that. It might be just time to replace it with a better looking decal. This gun has a lot of wear and tear on it. Some of it, honest, you'd expect just from regular handling. Some of it, abuse. Seriously. Somebody must have been pounding their tacks on the targets with this thing. I mean, do people really do that? I mean, people make jokes about it, but seriously, I mean, that looks like somebody used this as something of a hammer. And you can kind of confirm that a little bit because the top of the barrel here, the knurling, is impressed into the top of the aluminum cylinder. And the only way that could happen is if you're really crunching on it. Yeah, some people shouldn't own nice things. But this is a gun that I was definitely aware of in my childhood or youth. I saw pictures of it, never saw one in person. And and I shot the senior and shot the junior, and I'd never seen a Premier or even a Premier Mark II like this. So I did come across a fellow who let me shoot his just a number of years ago, maybe 10 years ago or so, and thought I rather liked it. He wasn't looking to sell his gun. He'd had it a long time and rather, wasn't ready to let it go, and it was a Premier Mark II. And yeah, always kind of curious about this particular model. So and owning one. So here it is. I do have one here that is obviously in need of some tender loving care. The paint finish on it, is painted. It's an epoxy type paint, and weirdly enough I actually do have epoxy paint, so I might actually have to break that out. It hasn't gone bad yet. So yeah, I repaint some of the surfaces, reblue a few things, clean everything up, check on the status of the piston seal. I think I've got a spare or two kicking around. This breech seal looks like it's seen better days, so that could be replaced. But yeah, there's not a lot known about these guns really. It said they were short-lived. Replaced in 1977 by the new line, the Hurricane, and eventually the Tempest. And there was also a Typhoon, which was a sort of a replacement for the Junior. They used a completely different sort of styling and casting. I guess they wanted to update things a bit more substantially than this one had been. But I have other theories as to why this gun wasn't around as long as it was. Also, this gun is the earliest of the Webley Premier Mark II. Even though the gun had a 2 or 3 year lifespan, they still managed to make 2 different versions of it. This one is the first one. The barrel here, as you can see, is all one piece with the steps on it for the cocking linkage and the pivot point. They replaced it shortly with one more like this, and this is actually supposedly a barrel from a Tempest, but I have a sneaking suspicion that it's the exact same part that they made for from the Premier Mark II, the second version of it. And this has a casting here that the barrel is inserted into. So yeah, this is obviously steel, but yeah, made in 2 pieces and married together, whereas this is all in one piece. This must have obviously been a bit of a cost-saving measure, and it allowed them to put a really spiffy-looking thing on it. I might actually try this barrel on it just for fun, if it fits. I think it will. This is a 177 barrel, and this gun is also 177. The seller who had it on auction said it was 22, but well, those numbers don't lie. It's a 177 gun, so which is fine. I'm quite happy with that. I would have been happy with it either way. So barrel looks in good condition. There's a lot of oil here and there on it. It doesn't seem terribly dry or neglected, although who knows how many owners it's had. This may have been done early on or late. I don't know, but I can see here that this piece is threaded on like the traditional Webley Seniors and what have you. So you take this pin out and you unthread the front part. Unlike, say, the later models, the Hurricane and so, when you take that pin out, it pops out. So you have to keep a hold of things. But I am really looking forward to see if I can refresh this gun and have some fun with it. I rather like the size of it. It's certainly a lot more compact than my Hurricane, which I'll compare it to later. But yeah, let's go along for the ride. It's a time-honored tradition to use the barrel pivot as a wrench to take off the front cap on Webleys. It's probably not ideal. It's also possible to use a short piece of wood, for instance, as a sort of a screwdriver to unthread it. And here I'm using a clamp just as an impromptu spring compressor in reverse. I just didn't want wasn't sure how violently the end cap would come off when the threads finally let go. As it turned out, there really wasn't a lot of pressure to worry about there. It wasn't going very far. Still, glad I did this. There it is, pops out easy enough. And Webley springs are actually a flat wound spring. They're not a round profile spring, and makes them a bit more expensive, harder to replace, but it does actually mean they store more energy in them, so that's how the guns are able to be decently powerful and yet fairly compact. Here I'm having trouble getting the piston out. It's really kind of sticky. Not really sure why. Here I'm trying to see if there's any of the trigger components that are holding back the piston, but not really, no, they're just kind of stuck. But I thought it probably wise to take the trigger parts out now. And as in a lot of guns, pins are usually driven in from the right-hand side and punched out from the left-hand side. There's usually a little slight swell on the right-hand side of the pin. So. Here's our trigger parts coming out. Still not really helping with that piston. It's just sticky. Being rather rough with the piston seal, but I'm going to replace it anyway. I've come to the conclusion it's gone rather gummy, and that's why it's not letting the piston come out the front. It's just kind of soft, which it's a Teflon type product, and that's really not how they are, so that one's got to be replaced. Fortunately, I can still get them. There's only one screw that holds on the rear sight assembly. You back it off and you can slide it side to side and up and down. It's not the most precise way of setting your sight picture, but it's what Webley used going way back when. This screw that goes down from the top, I believe, is just simply an access port where they drilled the transfer port from the piston to funnel it up towards the barrel, and you have to plug it off. And here I'm just proving that the only steel is on the actual piston tube. The rest of it is all non-magnetic aluminum. This is the trigger adjustment screw. It's in there pretty deep, and it's kind of burred into the aluminum quite a bit. It took a lot of work to slowly get that thing out. It goes in very, very deep for setting. I don't understand exactly why that is. And it's a very long screw as well, but it'd be better if it was even longer. carefully remove this decal. It says Premier Mark II on it. Don't want to lose this, and I want to see if I can maybe duplicate something a bit more legible. But I don't want to lose the original either. Stripping all the original paint off it, which comes with a bit of nervousness, you know, it can only be original once, but also it's got a lot of damage to it, so sad to say the old paint had to go. I was going to take it right back to bare metal. Sharp-eyed among you might notice there's one steel part still left in the gun that needs to be removed, and that is the little tiny pin that aligns the grips. Once I got the finish off, I took that out. And there's a lot of rough metal to smooth out here. With a file and some sanding, finally got the worst of the offensive out. And for the pits and divots that just were too deep to remove any more metal, I filled them in just using some 2-part epoxy here. Degreased it first, of course, and then just applied a fairly thin coat on. Only where it was really needed. And some of these little pits and things like that are probably just originally from the original casting. I have to say the casting doesn't look quite as refined as what you see on the later hurricanes and tempests. Then we just have to sand everything down nice and smooth, get it ready for painting. I do have some epoxy paint, 2-part epoxy, fairly nasty stuff. Wear a respirator and use it outdoors. I'm trying out here a new to me gravity-fed little spray gun here, and worked great for the primer. One of the frustrating things with this epoxy paint I find is the primer goes on beautifully. Nice finish on it. Getting the same sort of finish with the black is a lot more difficult. Sanded down the primer just to smooth things out a bit before I moved on to the black paint. My first effort with the black turned out with a little too much of an orange peel finish, so here it is. It's been sanded back again. It looks kind of gray here, but into supposedly black epoxy paint. And the second coat went on a lot better, so I decided to call it a day on this. Not perfect, but considerably better than what I had. Every last metal part got cleaned, degreased, and ready for future lubrication. So. Because some of the grease was kind of a little bit varnished on these parts, I decided to clean them off manually rather than trust them to the ultrasonic bath. I knew if I did that, I'd just have to clean them after I took them out of the bath anyway, so I may as well just clean everything by hand. Get a good look at it too. After the paint had thoroughly hardened, I had to remove all my little plugs that I put into the little screw holes here and there. I later regretted that I didn't put any in the holes for the trigger mechanism. And well, it probably wasn't a better way of doing it, but I did have to remove a fair bit of paint overspray that made it in some of the metal channels, especially the barrel linkage and where the piston seal goes in, and also some paint got onto the threads for the front plug, so that had to be cleaned out a fair bit too later on. You'll see me do that. And as you see, I do have original Webley spares. I'm going to have a brand new piston seal here. I believe it's some sort of Teflon or Delrin or something like that. And I have a new breech seal as well. That's right, I plugged up the piston tube as well, and I forgot to take that out. Swap it one more time before putting the piston back in. And as you can see, that piston slides in quite nicely compared to how difficult it was to get it out in the first place. So we've definitely made some progress there. This gun's a lot cleaner. Just use some moly grease on the various parts. Didn't use the thick and tacky stuff. Don't want to slow down a pistol like this. And it doesn't vibrate that much anyway, so this is the appropriate, one of the appropriate greases you can use for this kind of thing. decided to use the clamp again to kind of hold the spring guide front plug in place while I try to line up the threads and hopefully get it to go in. But you can also just use a big glove and just push on it and thread it in. But I'm kind of discovering that I do have paint residue here and there that will need to be cleaned out, so I'll be taking this part out again and giving it a thorough cleaning before final assembly. In the meantime, I put some of the rest of the parts on there because it's not going to interfere with any of that. This is the barrel latch, which is the type used from the Senior onwards. It might have been used on an earlier model as well. The original Mark 1, not Premier Mark 1, but Mark 1 Webleys had a sliding catch on the very top that you pull back with your thumb. This little catch right here is considered to be similar to what Webley used on their revolvers. The rear sight going back on again. Old piston seal being junked, new one being put in. This ends up being a bit too much of a tight fit when I try to close the barrel, so I ended up thinning it down a little bit. And this is where I realize that I've got too much paint residue in those little tiny holes. Just cleaning out with a needle file here, that seemed to do the job. This is the sear, and I decided this part has to go in first. And then one little trick that I do when trying to line up a through hole like that through a part is to put a small punch through. So on one side you've got the pin, all the way through you've got the punch. And you can't see it, but I'm tapping the pin through, and then the punch just drops out. That little screw on the side there is to lock the trigger adjustment, which in this case I'm really not using. Here I've taken the piston and the plug out again, and I'm just cleaning the edge of the channel where the cocking lever runs. There's little paint residue on the edge there, and it's just kind of making things bind up a little bit. I'm using a tap here to clean paint residue out of the grip screw holes. Still getting some paint flakes out of those threads. Clean them out a few times till I'm finally satisfied that it was good. I put some clear plastic tape over the glossy print to protect it, and should last for years. After cut to the right size, I glued it on with some contact cement. And that is the original decal that I have saved. Spring piston air pistols can be rather large. This is a Chinese one that I haven't had much chance to get sorted out properly yet, but it's a pretty big gun. Not the kind of thing you can stuff in your pocket, but that's fine. It's just basically a very shortened air rifle mechanism. But of course, efforts have been made to make air pistols a lot smaller over the years. This is the High Score 800, which I featured on a previous video. I was impressed by how remarkably small and compact this gun is. The barrel goes the entire length of the gun, the piston wraps around it, and that was one way to make a very neat and compact gun. However, our Webley is this big. It's considerably shorter. Again, the barrel's not as long either, for that matter. The barrel runs the full length, piston underneath. We've got a nice compact gun. This thing you can stuff this into an oversized coat pocket. Can't really say that about any other guns, and that was obviously the attraction of the Webley pistols all those years, was that they were just neat, handy, and well-made and decently accurate gun. But this is the Premier Mark II, and this one was only around for, as was said before, only about 2-3 years of production. 1975, 76, 77. Is that 3 years or just 2 years? I'm not really sure. So obviously a massive failure. As other Webleys, of course, have been in production for many, many, many years. I don't know that it really is a massive failure. It is a very nice little gun. It's a lot lighter because it doesn't have the forged steel frame back here. It makes it a lot neater. The balance is now a little bit more muzzle forward, which I like. Obviously easier to carry. It doesn't drag down your oversized coat pocket. So why such the short production run? I think, quite frankly, Webley had used 1970s technology to create this alloy frame wrapped around the steel piston tube, and successfully managed to make a 1970s version of a 1930s gun. This style of gun was, pretty much long in the tooth. Webley had brought this out in the 1930s. This doesn't look much different than a pre-war Webley Senior. Outdated design, perhaps. Still has Bakelite grips on it. I mean, 1970s, come on. People wearing leisure suits and platform soles. Bakelite? But there you had it. I think this ended up just being a jumping off point for Webley. They recognized that they could do this. The alloy casting worked, and you had the possibility, probably people saying, we need a more modernized product. We need something swoopier, sleeker, something that's more appealing to the 1970s, 1980s coming generation. There are probably people out there saying, where's the finely adjustable micrometer sights? Our competitors have that. The BSA Scorpion, I can't remember when that one exactly came around, But, you know, there were air pistols out there, the Dianas, the, fine work bows, things like that. And Webley were not really in that market with this old 1930s, design. And the sight, you just turn it, slide it around, tighten it down, hope you get it right. And of course, it was the 1970s, and I imagine there was probably a team of product liability lawyers saying, where's the safety catch? Our competitors have safety catches on their guns. We don't want to be the people out there without a safety catch, especially since the original Mark I, introduced in like 1924, had a safety catch right there. That got deleted, considered unnecessary, and you could argue maybe it was unnecessary. It's a spring piston air gun. You cock it, you shoot it. You don't want to shoot it, you can uncock it if you know what you're doing. So, yeah, the next generation of guns that came out in 1977 were the Hurricane, followed by the Tempest and the Typhoon. Much swoopier, sleeker design. They got rid of this step where they covered it over by putting a little forend on there, and it had a safety catch. On the downside, of course, you couldn't shoot those guns left-handed whatsoever. The big safety catch, swoopy grip thing just made it almost impossible to hold it in your left hand. But never mind that. That was the way forward for Webley, and these guns were discontinued. But that said, I think we've got a really neat gun here. Last of its kind. Let's give it a test. So now that everything's back together and working well, this is the right time to put it across the chronograph and see just how much performance we do or don't have out of this disco-era Webley. Caulking is still a little rough. A lot of the parts need to be just smoothed in a little bit, but okay. .406. Yep, the 400s right away. These are fairly lightweight Geco or Gecko, if you like small lizards, wad cutters. They're in the 7+ grain weight. Can't remember if they're 7.2s or something like that. $3.98. $4.16. If you think I was expecting a 500 foot per second reading out of this, you'd be mistaken. This is a fairly small compact air pistol and very powerful for its day. 430. Oh, okay. I put a little bit of drop of oil down the transfer port a little while ago, and it's just kind of working its way in, I guess. And 428. And looks like we might expecting velocities in that 425 plus range. That didn't read. I wasn't aiming properly across the grid, I don't think. This trigger is surprisingly light on this gun. And I don't have the trigger adjustment, which is essentially reduces the sear contact. I don't have that touching the trigger parts right now, so this is as heavy as the trigger gets, and it's still pretty darn light. 449. Oh my gosh. Might be getting a bit of dieseling here. There's a little bit of smoke coming out, so again, this is a fully freshly resurfaced gun. There's going to be lubricants in places that probably don't belong. 455. And it's climbing up there, isn't it? Parts are bedding in. Piston's running smoothly with its brand new seal. .225. Oh, look at that. I didn't have the barrel latch properly. Popped right open. The new seal I put in here is a little bit little bit stubborn. It's taken a while to kind of, you have to press hard to get the barrel latched in, and I guess I screwed up. .467 continues to climb. I have to admit, I'm just keeping going here because I'm just curious to see what's going to happen. How high can we go? .469. So right now we're exceeding the power of that high score, 800, that was at one time considered the world's most powerful air pistol. You see it's not quite closing there. Gotta try a little harder. That's got it. Okay. .470. Yeah, that is one decently powerful Webley. So despite its age, it's not giving up anything on power. And yeah, we've got some pretty good results there. Now I'm going to take it to the range and see if I can shoot it accurately. So once at the range, I put on my proper shooting glasses with my diopter eyepiece, and I sighted the gun in with RWS Meisterkugeln wad cutters. These are the lighter ones at 7.7 grains, in the hope that they would, you know, shoot fairly well in this gun. My first group was a little encouraging, but also a little disappointing. I felt I wasn't quite getting the best out of it. I did get the feeling that when I pulled a shot, I knew it. So which is a good thing. When you think you shot low and it goes low, yeah, that's actually a good thing. But this first group only came out at 34 millimeters, which is a bit under 1.5 inches. I felt the gun could do better, so tried a couple more groups with that, and then I moved over to the JSB RS dome pellets, the light ones at 7.33 grains, and I really struggled here. I felt either I was getting a bit tired or not properly working the trigger, but I also then began to conclude that, well, maybe it is the pellets. Maybe it just doesn't seem to like these ones very well. Probably should have tried the heavier ones, but this group came in at 50 millimeters, and that was the best that I got with these pellets. So I went back to the Meisterkugelns, and after another trial, I finally got this group here, which I felt was better representative of the day's shooting. These 5 shots came in at 21 millimeters, which is just under 1 inch, so I'll take that all day. I thought that was pretty good. So what do I think of this Webley Premier Mark II? I like it. I think it's a real keeper. It's a trim, compact gun, definitely smaller than the Hurricane that came afterwards. It is in some ways the very last of the old school 1920s, 30s style Webley, for sure. And that certainly makes it a bit endearing. And it's a nice size. The trigger is actually quite good, actually. It's light, but it actually is quite controllable, much better than my dad's Senior, so rather like that. Yeah, the Bakelite grips are definitely a bit old-fashioned, but... And of course, it does have this paint finish, which is now my paint finish. But yeah, the Premier Mark II did not have the beautiful bluing that Webley were famous for all those years. But anyway, I'll be enjoying this pistol for many years to come, I think. But thanks for watching. Canacare will return. Consider subscribing.